We are here for an interview with somebody joining us from Alberta, Canada, which is kind of cool, Edmonton area. And we'd like to welcome Sally King to the podcast. Welcome, Sally.
Hi,
Thank you for
Sally.
having me.
Thanks for being here.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Took a minute. We had
I
some
did,
tech
but we got there in
issues
the end.
and yep, here we are. I mean, when when the time is right, the time is right.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I
Yeah.
agree. Well, we're going to dig in. So tell us, how did you find us, by the way?
Instagram.
Oh, really?
Instagram. See?
Was it
Yeah.
through, I'm just curious, was it just through our reels or through
Uh, it
through
was it was through a reel I saw. And then I sort of,
Okay.
oh,
Mhm.
oh,
There
cool.
you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're always trying to weigh like,
Yeah.
should we keep doing reels? Okay, that's awesome. Okay. Well, thank you
Good.
for following our Instagram and being here. So we're going to dig right in. You've heard the podcast. So just
Yep.
start with your story, how you'd like to tell it.
Yep.
So I am an adult adoptee. I was in foster care due to neglect, and then I was later adopted. And
How old were you?
I was apprehended at 6 months.
Mm.
And now my adopted parents are both dead, and most of my family is dead and doesn't speak to me also. So there's that.
Oh gosh. Well, we're going to hear about it.
Yeah. So I have no one to ask. Like I would love to ask my mother, like now that, because my mom died when I was 18. And I sort of got the message. I talk about that in my book, that there was a time when I was 13 that I asked her what my name was before, because my name is actually Sally Jean with a hyphen, seriously. And
With the hyphen.
Sally Jean.
Sally
You
Jean.
sure you're not from Georgia?
No, and she's from England. That's the weird part. So, but anyways, I always hated that. And I remember sitting at the kitchen table, and she was at the kitchen window, and I could see her reflection in the mirror, and I saw her face just shut down.
Oh.
And I knew right then this subject was off limits.
That was
And I
it.
mean, it wasn't like, yeah. And I remember thinking, listen, I don't hate my adoptive parents. They were amazing. They really were. But, I'm 59, so I'm a little older. People weren't quite as
It was
Yeah.
that era of
it really was that era. And so, I sort of went through this my whole life. Like I used to have red curly hair, but now I'm an old bag, so it's all gray, but I gave up coloring it.
I'm giving up
And
coloring it.
I'm so over it. COVID was like, okay, I'm done. Peace out.
You look beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, it's all,
You're
and
not
it's
an
like,
old bag. I think you look great.
Yeah.
thank you. And so, and I have a cat hair, always attractive. Sorry, guys, cats. So I ended up like, and my whole family was like dark brown, straight, like dark brown hair, brown eyes,
Oh.
poker straight, really thick. Like my mom, my dad, and my adopted brother too.
Mhm.
And so I was kind of this, and I'm really tall. I'm 5'11", and my adopted brother is 5'9". And so, I always stuck out like a sore thumb. And as my mom would say, and I always felt different. I always felt like I didn't, but I just sort of went through life and just thought that maybe there was a piece of me that was just broken. Right.
Mhm.
Did they tell you anything about your just you knew you were adopted, obviously.
I knew I was adopted, but it was always that, fairy tale story about it takes far more love to give a child up than it does that you can't, that one. I don't mean to tell you the whole sentence.
Yeah.
And because you've all heard it. And I always was told that my mother was a secretary and my father was a truck driver. But in my search travels, apparently that was a Canada thing. They told every adoptee that their mother was a secretary and their father was a truck driver. My brother has the same story. It's ridiculous.
Interesting.
Right?
The truck driver thing is probably because then they're on the road and good luck.
I guess, but it's when I did finally meet my birth mother when I was 31, none of that could have been further from the truth. Like that was not her situation at all. But so I always wanted to know, but I just knew that day when I was 13, seeing her face in the window, that I don't want to hurt her.
Mhm.
And so as an adoptee, we go through this life people pleasing, and we don't want to hurt anybody, and we don't want to rock the boat. But eventually it's a bit like a pressure cooker, right?
Yeah.
And then she sadly died when I was 18. And that's when I started looking. And of course, at that time, there was really nothing,
Yeah.
because that's a few years ago.
Was your father still alive? Your adoptive father?
He was still alive, but he had basically, she was the love of his life, and he basically shut down when she died.
Mm.
And he, 2 weeks after her funeral, he got another woman and went off to Reno with her. And yeah,
Oh,
it
yeah.
was all very sordid. And I didn't do well with that. And so him and I kind of battled quite a lot until he was killed in a boating accident when I
Oh
was
no.
24. Yeah.
Gosh, Sally,
yeah.
wow.
24. That's
That's a
two
lot
big
of loss.
losses. Yeah.
It was.
Being 6 months old and taken from
Yes.
your,
Boom.
Yeah,
that's a lot of
and,
loss.
and
Mhm.
that was just like, and I just did life. I just carried on and did life. And we ended up, when I was in my 40s, with a little girl that came to us, like literally came to us. And we ended up, she was in foster care, and we ended up adopting her. And it wasn't until because I took I'm trauma informed. I've read every book. I've taken every course. And as through taking these courses, I'm like, oh my God, this is me. Like I took courses on FASD and stuff like that. And
You were taking it for her and learning about you.
And I was in a course with Jeff Noble. I don't know if you've heard of him, probably. Okay, he's the FASD. He calls himself the world-renowned FASD expert. And I took a course with him, and he's very good and he's very funny. But I remember sitting there, and he was describing.
Can you say what the acronym is for people who are listening?
Oh, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder.
Oh, okay, okay.
Sorry, FASD. Yeah. So, and so I knew that my daughter had been prenatally exposed. Our adopted daughter had been prenatally exposed. So I, of course, am taking every course. And I remember, it was funny. I met my birth mother when I was 30. And I remember thinking, man, I can't believe she didn't drink when she was pregnant with me. Like, I literally thought that. And I said that to my husband in the car on the way home, because she was a mess. And sadly, and when I was sitting in this course, I had to get up. He was talking about the traits of someone with FASD, and they can be minor or they can be severe. And I remember sitting there fighting back tears going, holy crap, this is me.
Oh.
This is me. And I had to leave. And I went, and I remember sitting in the cubicle in this hotel where this conference was, sobbing. And my husband was working in Fort Mac at the time, and calling him and going, Marie, this is me. This is me. And just bawling. Like,
oh, Sally. Yeah.
And he's like, he's in the field. He's got the sobbing wife on the phone. But it was such a it was like they were happy and sad tears, because I always thought there was something wrong with me. I always thought, why am I like this? Like, why? Right? I had no answer.
What are some of what are some
I was going to ask that too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the, because now I'm like, maybe I have it.
Well, it can be very like one of the biggest ones is no cause and effect. So if I shove this computer over right now, this podcast is screwed.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it just could be fun, and I just push it over. There's no impulse control. They're very easily led. We had friends that had a diagnosed in FASD child. They used to just lose their mind, because it's like they just won't listen, and we consequence them, and we do this, and he just does it. They're not able to actually go, if I do that and knock this computer over, it's going to break, it's going to wreck this, it's going to wreck the phone. Like, they can't get
it affects your executive functioning. You can't
exactly.
I was definitely like that as a teenager, 100%. I'm going to look into this.
Well, I got lots of information for you if you want some.
Yeah, I do. I will. So,
okay. And there's no impulse control too. And like, I don't go and go, I am going to say something to my husband and I am going to get him. There's no thought process. It's just like,
right.
You just puke it all out. And then there's this spiral of shame afterwards, because of course I know about the emotional brain and the thinking brain, and that the thinking brain is 3 seconds slower than the emotional brain,
That's
sadly.
right.
So you puke out your venom, and then
immediately regret it.
Immediately regret it. And so the spiral of shame. And then I also had when I was a kid too, my aunt married this man who turns out was a pedophile. And I was his whatever person.
You're an easy target. Yeah,
I was an easy target. I
adoptees in general they're an easy target.
100%. I mean, because he didn't touch the other girl, my cousins didn't touch them, because I talked to them, and what they said to me was, nope, he never touched me, but I believe you.
Yeah.
Because
Because
he
they
was
had the
creepy.
vibe. Yeah.
Yeah, because he was creepy, right? And but everybody took her side. She was the favorite aunt. And so I kind of became a bit of a pariah.
In
And I
the
still am to this day.
family, in the
Yeah.
larger family,
Yeah. Not with
adopted.
my parents, not with my parents. They were gone. Well, not when I was 10, they weren't gone. But like, yeah, I always was, and they always sort of like, oh, that's Sally. And I knew people were talking about me, that I had no impulse control, and I had no, so to just be validated that way was huge. And so then like I say, I've taken every book. Our daughter's name is Serenity. We didn't name her that. That was
It's a
her.
beautiful name.
It is beautiful, but everyone goes, I get a lot of pushback on that. And it's like, I wasn't going to change her name because she was a year old when we got her. She was Serenity, and that's damaging to a child, right?
Mhm, very, yeah.
So I remember doing all this for Serenity because I was going to do it better than my parents did, because the information is out there now. So my husband always says I do better research than the FBI, and he's not wrong. So I researched the heck out of this. I took every course. Empowered to Connect is an amazing one with, like just amazing books I've read. And I wanted to be as informed because I didn't want her to grow up, especially because our daughter is Indigenous.
Oh,
And
Indigenous adoptee fetal alcohol syndrome.
yes.
How
Yes.
did she at a year old when you got her? Did you know she had it, or was it just something you thought? Were there signs that she
Well,
exhibited as a
no.
baby?
See, we're in Canada. And let me just educate you a little. So you know about the 60s scoop?
Of
Yes.
course, we're part of the American 60s scoop.
Right. Okay. So it was doubly evil in Canada. Just an FYI, you guys just killed people. We just put them in residential schools and tortured and
Yeah.
abused them.
I saw that recently on a big expose.
So we have a terrible addiction issue on reservations in Canada. Like it's notorious. 85% of kids in care in Canada are Indigenous.
Yeah.
Because their parents just can't their parents just can't look after them. They're not able. They've got the FASD. I mean, because of the trauma, and I believe in generational trauma.
Generational trauma, yeah.
So it's not just generational trauma. It's like, it's also like my daughter's birth mother's mother was in a residential school. So it was that close, right?
Yeah.
And her birth mother's in her 30s.
And also I'm a history person. You know that Indigenous people can't process alcohol.
Absolutely.
In the natural state. And so that was a way that countries poison them on purpose.
That's right.
They knew that.
Exactly. So they know for a fact that Serenity's mom did crystal meth and heroin, but alcohol usually it usually goes part and parcel. And so, because her mom admitted to that. So we knew that. So I knew I was heading into something, and I was going to be, and there's no help out there, I thought. But I, again, did my research and found people and I found a neurological, I found all kinds of doctors and stuff. And so we've done a lot with her, and she's just about 13 and she's amazing. But I knew that I had to get it early, and I had to counteract anything her mom did. And I didn't know if it would work, but I was going to die trying. Like I didn't want her to feel the same way that I felt.
Yeah.
My whole life. Right.
I have a question about this. This is kind of off the subject, but do you take her to know her history, or does she know her birth mother and all that stuff?
So she doesn't know her birth family. They're all sadly complete addicts, like living. I don't even know if her mom's still alive anymore, but I was very, very adamant that I wanted to meet her mother and her father, because I wanted to know them and I wanted to love on them. And because I knew that when she was 13, one day she'd come to me and say, "Mommy, what was my mom like?" And I wanted to be able to tell her, and I wanted to not lie to her and make up some fancy little story. So because that's what I got that wasn't true, right? So I met her birth mother, and her birth mother loved me. And I don't know where she is now. I mean, it's a rough lifestyle, right? It's very, very sad. And I just, my heart bled for her. Like, we've had lots of names thrown at us. Oh, why would you want to go meet some blank Indian? you know, when I wanted to meet her birth mother, and I would shut people down very, very quickly on that, you know, like that blank, blank Indian that you just so eloquently called my daughter's mother. That's half of who she is.
Yeah.
Watch your mouth. You know, like, don't talk like that. That's
Is there a lot of
unkind.
racism in that?
Lots.
Oh, okay.
It's getting better, but it is very, very bad. And I'm ready for it, right? Like, because I even just being an adoptee is enough.
Mm-hmm.
Then add being a racially different to you. It's just another layer of trauma, really, you know. And so I wanted to do everything I could to counteract that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's because I'm doing for her what wasn't done for me, you know.
So jumping back, because when you started to research FASD and you're like, wait a minute, this was
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And you had already met your birth mother, which, by the way, how did that come about?
Yeah, let's go to that.
So I have 2 biological sons, and my oldest was he was 11 weeks old, and I picked him up out of his swing, and he had a grand mal seizure in my arms.
Oh,
yeah, it was fun. And the doctors treated me like I was an imbecile, and that I went, oh, you're a first-time mother, aren't you? You know,
Mm-hmm.
he had a seizure. I know what a seizure is. And so we're at a small town hospital at the time in Alberta. And so I phoned my husband, he came and got me, and we went to the big children's hospital in Calgary. And right away they knew that I was telling the truth.
Yeah.
Right. I told them what he did. So long story short, he had abnormal brain waves on both sides of his brain, and they don't want to medicate 11-week-old baby if they can avoid it. So they wanted a family history.
Mm.
So I fought the Alberta government, and let me tell you, it was a fight. But I didn't have red hair for nothing. So
Yeah.
I fought hard, and I did all kinds of news stories. W5 did a story on me.
That's your local news or big news?
No, that's the big Canadian.
Oh, the big.
That's the equivalent of the Canadian equivalent of, I'm trying to like 60 Minutes or.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay.
It's the whole country. And so, and they came and filmed at our house for 2 days and interviewed me, and because I wanted to find my I needed to find my birth family. So the government then set up this thing where you could pay a lot of money, and they'd give you a private investigator to find your birth mother. So they have all the information, but you have to pay for it, because that seems
right,
fair.
Of course, yeah.
That seems fair. And I remember Lyndon McIntyre, who is the very famous Canadian host of that show, and he said to me, we were sitting at my kitchen table, and he said to me, he says, what do you say to Canadians who say, oh, she just wants like she's just using her adoption to get fame or whatever? And I said, fame? I said, first of all, are you going to make me famous? Because awesome. But no, they didn't. I said, but second of all, I said, why am I not afforded the same rights as every other Canadian citizen? The right to know who I am.
We talk about this so much.
Why am I not afforded that? Why do I have? And then they gave me this awful piece of garbage human, this stay-at-home mom that's supposed to be this. No, and I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm not slamming the stay-at-home moms. I've been one my whole life. So just don't anybody come at me. But she clearly had no clue what the hell she was doing. And she was cocking it up royally. And I had hired a private investigator before, but she just didn't have any information. All she had was what I had, which was, bogus, non-identifying information, because they'll give you your information but it's like everything, most of it's redacted, so you can't see jack. So it's like there's some sentences is like, okay, there's a the and an and it. Well, that tells me tons, right?
Right, yeah.
And so they said, well, we could subcontract your private investigator.
Oh my goodness.
I still had to pay her, but she was very good to me financially, I will tell you. As a matter of fact, I paid her, and then I got married a month later, and she came to the wedding, and she gave me all the money back as a wedding gift.
Oh,
which, I mean,
someone good in the process.
Someone good in the process, yeah. But she knows she had to charge me, or the social service government wouldn't hire her. So she knows I had to pay her. So then she just gave it all back to me. She was lovely. But anyway, once she had all the information, she found my birth mother in half an hour.
Half an hour.
Half an hour.
And you're needing this because your son is needing testing and all sorts of things.
Yes. I've got an 11-week-old baby in the children's hospital, and you're telling me, well, I don't know what a family history would do. And I'm like, I'm telling you what the neurologist said. And I think she probably has a little more education on this than you do. Thanks. Like, I wasn't nice about it. And
I like that you're so fiery. I want to see a picture of you and you're.
Yeah, I've always been a little fiery. I'm not going to lie. But life has made me be.
Yeah.
Life has made me be fiery. Like, I feel like I've had to justify my existence my whole life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you.
And it's,
yes.
and yet it's such a dichotomy that we're in, because as much as I've had to justify my existence, I know there's a lot of adult adoptees that hate adoption. And I'm not one of them, because I met my birth mother. I was one of 6 kids, and she lost us all. I am in reunion with her family. She's the outcast of her family. And I'm in reunion. They were here for Thanksgiving. I had 15
all
people
your
here
siblings and everything.
All my, not siblings. The siblings are all pretty messed up. We found most of them, except for 2. And they're very, very messed up, and not we met them. We had a reunion, but
I have a question about that. Were they all adopted? Were they all adopted out?
Yes.
And their situations were not as good as yours.
Right. They're where they were raised, for sure, but they were apprehended at birth, and I spent 6 months with my birth mother.
Mm-hmm. Where were you in the birth order?
There were 6 of us, and I was number 5.
Wow.
And when I found my birth family,
the reason I asked that is because it's always interesting to me, the sliding doors of it all, right? Like, what goes into making a person, and who you go home with, how long you're with your mom, all these things.
Yeah.
And it could be, maybe your sibling went home with something else horrible.
That's right. That's right. And I feel like, having gone through the adoption process with Serenity, it's an incredibly broken system. It's incredibly antiquated. Like, people think that, did social services tell you to take that course? No, I found it myself. They tell you nothing. They give you nothing. They tell you that, I went to one social services seminar, and this woman got up on stage and she said, "What do you think you know about FASD is nothing." And she was wanting us to all hire her as her, and she said, the best you can hope for with these kids is that if you got a girl, that she doesn't end up pregnant at 13. And if you got a boy, you keep them out of jail. That's the best you can hope for.
That's what she said.
That's what she said. That was the first line.
How lovely.
And I just looked at her and I said, "I'm out of here." I was in the middle of this seminar, and I just looked at her and I said, "I'm out of here." And I got up and walked out. I'm like, I'm not listening to this garbage. And so that just, if someone tells me you can't do that,
throwing away children before they've even had a chance.
I've
and
done
educating other people to that message.
Isn't that just sickening? And what's interesting is that I've done a lot of talks, because I wrote a book, right? I've done a lot of podcasts, I've done a lot of interviews, and every single time and I've done a lot of talks, I do a lot of public speaking, and I always say, foster kids are disposable. They're the great unwashed. And if you're an Indigenous foster child, it's even worse. And it is.
What's the age difference between your 2 biological sons and Serenity?
So Brady's 25. Tyson just turned 23 last week, and Serenity will be 13 the end of this month. So there's 10 to 12 years.
The relationships are good between all of them, and
they are amazing. They love their sister. She adores them. They don't live at home anymore, and that was the biggest heartbreak for her. So they have her over for pizza night, and they live in the same building but not together, which is a good thing. And
the brothers.
The brothers. Yeah. And one lives with his girlfriend, and one has a roommate, but they have her over all the time. And Tyson's girlfriend is amazing to her, and they take her shopping, and they take her to they text her all the time and talk to her all the time, because we live an hour and a half from them. We live out in the country, we live in the boonies. And so they're very, very close. But I worked on that. I fostered that. I never wanted them to feel like they were raising her because they were so much. Now they definitely babysat. Social services didn't want them to babysit unless they took the babysitting course. And they're like, this silly girl was up there with a teddy bear trying to show them how to diaper. And Brady got up, he was 12, and said, "Oh, for Pete's sake, move over." And he had that diaper on in 2 seconds. And she goes, "You have younger siblings?" She goes, "Yeah, I do."
So I have a question. Did you tell Serenity about her FASD?
We've talked mildly about it. But not a ton. I don't need to, because I don't want that to define her. That's not who she is. And, we spend a lot of time labeling ourselves and saying, "Oh, well, I believe that language has power." And so that's not her whole story. That's not her whole story.
Do you share with her what you found out about you and your struggles? And
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And actually when she was 10, she wanted to read my book. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want her. Like, I don't, because like I talk about the sexual abuse and, and stuff, but I thought, you know what? And then she read about she's now read the whole book. So she knows. I wasn't going to stop her. We've never had secrets are what make adoptions bad. Secrets and lies and pretty stories. Now, I don't want to make it, I don't say, "Oh, your mom was a drunk and a drunk." I know her mom loved her. I know she loved her. I know she wanted her. I know she wanted it. She tried, but she was introduced to drugs at 9 years old by her mother. Her mother died at 41. Her mom and dad died at 41 of a drug overdose.
9 years old.
9 years,
And
so
were there no resources for her to
no, there isn't, and there still isn't. I work with a organization in the UK called Adoption Chatter, and there's a birth mom there, and she gave up. So she's one of the one of the people on our team. She's a birth mother because we feel like we have to have the voice of everybody, and she was 18 years old and had 2 kids and an abusive boyfriend. If she'd have just been given some support, she could have kept her kids. And I'm all about that. That wouldn't have been the case for Serenity's mom because she was so damaged by the FASD, because there's different levels of it, right? There's so many different levels of it. So it's really, really, she's very, 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 like, I'll give you an example of, like, they're bad with money because it's just, everything's temporary. Everything's in that moment, right? So like if you had FASD and I called you up and said, "Hey, do you want to, want me to come over and get you and we'll go out for supper?" "Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, I'll be there in half an hour." And if somebody else showed up 5 minutes after that and said, "Hey, do you want to go out for supper?" They'd just go, because she'd have forgot that call that I'm coming in half an hour. Like, they just can't get, so it's very hard to raise a child with that kind of,
well, especially without early intervention.
And that's exactly it. And there's lots of early intervention, but it's not easy. No. It's dietary changes. I hired a guy and he did neurological rehabilitation on her, and she was classic. He said, when he assessed her, he said, "She's classic FASD." But you do things like lots of stuff off of an exercise ball and putting her upside down, and it's right, the midline connection, right? Like, crossing over, like having her raise up her left arm and her left leg when she's on her tummy, things like that. So that her right arm and her left leg, do you know what I mean? So that you're crossing the midline, like, because what happens when there's drugs and alcohol to the brain, to develop the brain, is prenatally, is the left and the neuron pathways that connect the left and the right side of your brain, that's what gets damaged. There's an old wives' tale out there that their brains are full of holes. It's not true. They're just missing, but like a stroke victim who has lost use of one side, you can rebuild that. You can rebuild those pathways. Brain injury, same thing. It is a form of brain injury, right?
It is a brain injury. Yeah, I've read a lot about it.
Yeah, so and so this guy helps you reconnect the left and the right side of the brain, and we watched our little girl change in front of our eyes. But we were doing exercises and dietary changes, and we still are very strict with her diet. But so there's things, but it's early. You got to do it early. You can't bring in a 15-year-old kid that's really derailing and think you're gonna you know, it would be hard to get them to even do the exercises that's required 5 times a day. And like, it was a lot of work, you know, but there is intervention. Go ahead.
Going back to your story,
Yes.
you met so you find her and realize you're one of 6, and she clearly wasn't a secretary.
Clearly not.
What about your truck driver father?
Well, that's an interesting thing because we can't find him. We don't even know who he is. She's also my birth mother's a pathological liar, and that's very well known to her family, which is why they are estranged from her. She gave me this wonderful story about how that I was taken at birth because she'd had a 60-hour labor, and then they ended up doing a C-section. And when she was under, they took me away from her, and it's all BS.
You were with her for a long time.
I was with her for 6 months, and she sort of missed that part. She was telling me her version of the story.
Who does she say the version of your father is?
He was some guy he was working up north in Alberta, and he was going, and that's what it was. He was coming down after I was born. He was so happy, and he was coming down to see me, and he was killed in a car accident on the way. That's the story she gave me. That's right.
And you've done the DNA, you've done all that.
I did it. And I found the line, but they think, after finding some cousins in Ontario, they think that my father was the product of an affair, and they never had any contact with that affair.
Okay, so that your father was a product, so nobody knows him.
Nobody knows him.
Maybe he was adopted.
I know. Apparently, she kept him. They do know that, but she kept him. But they never had anything to do with her or him after that. Like, she just sort of left.
And so you can't track him down.
I've tried. I can't find him.
Huh.
And you're the person that could.
Did you try a search angel?
Right?
Have you tried a search angel?
Yeah, I've heard. No, I don't. I think I've heard of Search Angel. I think I got so, it was so arduous and the search was so long. I think I sort of went, oh, screw it. I think I might have heard about Search Angel. What is Search Angel? I don't think I know.
Sarah
sort of
did that. Tell her.
I had somebody help me because my we don't need to go into my story because it's out there, but my birth mother also was adopted. But we didn't know who the father was,
right.
So somebody reached out to us due to a guest that we had in Ireland. She's like, I'd love to help Cormac. And I'm like, well, I could actually use some help because I've hit the end of the road. And I let her log into my ancestry, and then she hooked me up with a couple of other sites, and she found who he was within 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
I can connect you with her.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, she's just like a dog with a bone and can easily. It just is somebody who's good at it. So yes, I will connect you.
Awesome,
Marnie. Shout out, Marnie.
Yeah, no kidding. So I kind of, that kind of stalled out, and then right around that stalled out was when Serenity came along, and so then I got focused real elsewhere, right? But I always knew I was adopted. I was always a pretty story, but you just still don't feel like you belong.
When you were reading about yourself and you were sobbing to your husband on the phone, what besides the impulsive things, were there things that, like, what was the standout couple things?
The standout was the impulsive stuff. Like, because so many things happen, and I have a bad reaction to them. Like, I can flip on a dime. I used to be able to. I'm learning now to not do that. But I just thought that I remember I actually reached out to Jeff Noble when I actually talked to him afterwards. And at the seminar, I said, I have to tell you something. And I told him, I said, I was adopted too. And I always felt like my mom drank. And now I'm convinced of it because like you were describing me. I said, I said these words to him, and he got choked up. I said, I just thought I was an asshole.
Same, me too.
Right. And I just thought I was a terrible person. Sally, and people just, and all I ever wanted to do was be loved. Like, I mean, I'm probably pretty low on the spectrum as far as FA, because it's a spectrum with fetal alcohol, right? It's not like there's, excuse me, there's a spectrum, but I think I was fairly low. So I'm pretty high functioning, but some of them are not. Like, some of them couldn't make it down the hall without having 7 things distract them and break 4 things.
Yeah.
Right. You hear foster kids smashing TVs and stuff. And so much of that, I also believe, is not being heard.
Mm-hmm.
And not, the hardest part, someone said to me, like, what's been the hardest part about being adopted? And I said, the hardest part is that, and I got it with Serenity too, is, oh, she's so lucky. She's so lucky. And I remember
that's not the word that it's.
I said to
I heard it my whole
language
life.
needs to change.
Yeah. I heard it all the time. And they say it about Serenity. And I now speak up and go, lucky? Losing her family, losing her mother and her father and all of her family and her connection and her heritage. Wow, you got an interesting sense of lucky.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. I don't know.
You're creating a family out of loss, and there's grief, and it starts with grief, and just talk about it.
Yes. And this is what I want as an adult adoptee and an adoptive mother, because there's adult adoptees who don't like me because I've adopted, because I've joined the dark side in their eyes. And that's their journey. That's their story. But that's not a story that serves me. That's not a story that's going to serve her. But if we can be acknowledged and recognized as this is trauma, and that this is a problem, and that we have to be better. Like, I was at we homeschool, and I was at a homeschool teen thing, and this woman was there with her 2 adopted kids, and she's doing everything perfect. Just ask her, she'll tell you. And and she goes, oh, my kids don't care about their birth, but they don't want to know.
I hate that.
That really
drives me.
Like, lady, they're in survival mode. They care. They just aren't going to tell you.
Right?
They're not going to tell you because they'll disappoint you.
Exactly. They'll see that reflection in the window.
I was just going to say that. Yep.
Yeah. And so I said to her, I said, well, you got to know that. And I said it gently like this, you got to know at some point they're going to want to know. And she just, like, if she could have blown me across the table with her words, she did. Like, my bangs would have been like, she goes, listen, sister, you raise your kid the way you want. I'll raise mine my way. I don't need your shit.
Well, there you go.
And walked out.
All right, lady, you're going to have some problems down the line.
Enjoy that.
Kids. Yeah,
what makes me sad about that is those kids, because they don't have the voice. They're going to end up.
Exactly.
We were talking about this with Moses Farrow, that you start talking about it early, so we don't have to do the therapy on the back end. And I mean, you still have to do it, but like, you're talking to Serenity. This is your story. This is your heritage. This is who you are. That's half of it. It's just being able to say, Mom, I have a concern. Can I say this to you? This is why
100%.
We have to put our egos away. It's an ego thing. It would be hard. Listen, and I know it's hard because we have children. Yeah. And it would be hard for my son to be like, well, I want to know these people or these people. But you kind of have to go, what's better for my kid?
That's right. We were camping one time. I use this example. Like, we make talking about adoption and stuff like it's past the salt. It's just done in our home. Serenity has a therapist. I was very adamant that she would have a therapist for her entire childhood. I made sure that I put that in her contract when we adopted her, and she sees her every 2 weeks, because I want her to be able to have someone to go to and go, I'm so mad at my mom. She was so stupid the other day. You know what I mean? Like, I want her to have that person that she can go to, because she very much protects me. It's interesting, the dynamic we have. And so, but she will say things to me. I had one very particularly bad day. It was a bad day, and I was being a bit snippy. I'm not going to lie. I was being 5, and she came up to, and I said something snippy to her, and she came up to me in that moment, and she wanted to say something. I said, say it, just say it. I said, Serenity, I'm calm now. And she said to me, she says, you say you love me, but today your words didn't say you love me. And I went, You're absolutely right. You are
Just to have
absolutely right.
that power that she felt safe to say that to
Yeah.
you.
And I
That's
said,
not going
and
on in that other woman's home, I hate to
no, it's
say.
not. And I said, I apologize, sweetheart. I was having a bad day and I wasn't mad at you. And you just happened to get, and I'm very, very sorry. And please, can you forgive me? You know what she said? She goes, I need to think about it.
Yeah.
Which still cracks me up to this day. I went, that's fair. But afterwards I thought, good for you. I'm not exonerating you the second you say those words. You have to,
You have to
sweat
think
a little
about
bit.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I thought that was lovely, But it's always an open book. And I wish it could have been for me, Sorry, go ahead.
I was just curious, 'cause I was jumping back to your story. What, I'm curious about your adoptive brother. Did you stay in touch? Are you?
Oh, yeah, no. My
It's
adopted
because that's
brother.
a weird, when you think about it, it's a weird thing. You have two, my adoptive brother, and I don't know if he listens to my podcast. I highly doubt it, but
Yeah,
he just has kind of severed himself from the rest of the
yeah,
family. And, I think, and from anecdotally from all of our interviews,
yeah,
many people don't still keep in touch with their,
right,
two strangers placed into a strange family
right,
with no
right.
genetic, anyway.
Connection with her. Yes. And
Yeah.
so we don't speak. Um he says happy birthday on my birthday, sends me a text and says happy birthday.
Same
And I
with
send
mine.
him a text and say happy birthday. And if I say, how are you? He says, can't complain, and it's over.
That's
Like
it for the year. That's
This is
your year.
exactly my
we're done.
relationship.
And we're done. And it's very, very sad. I mean, a part of that is due to my parents dying so young. That messed us up very badly. I mean, my dad was missing for 24 hours and we were part of the search. And so it was just, because his boat capsized. And
Gosh.
so it was super traumatic, right? And my brother's just on a different path. And he did find his birth mother. I helped him find his birth mother. But when he found his birth family, I could see I was being discarded. And I don't want to act like I'm threatened by that, because that's not my point. But I could see that mom and dad were both dead. He still has contact with
Your adoptive
our
family.
adoptive family. I don't. They all kicked me to the curb. They all kicked me to the curb. It's okay. I mean, it is what it is. It's of course it's a grief. Of course it's a loss, but I've sort of come to terms with it. I mean, I've been in therapy now. I mean, like, is there any of us that aren't? And so I
There are.
yeah, I know. But I'm still in therapy, and because I know that my reactions to things are not always perfect and always, and so I always need to unwrap that, right? And because I have to be different for that. I mean, I've got 3 kids. I can't be, and a husband. I can't be that my whole life, so I've always been sort of trying to, I'd always been trying to muddle through what was wrong with me, but it was never, what was interesting is every therapist that I'd ever been to before we got Serenity was never unpacking the adoption thing. That was never a part of why I was a mess. It was always the abuse, which is obviously the abuse was a thing, but there was bigger stuff. I mean, why did I get targeted, not my 2 other cousins who are the same age as me, relatively the same age as me? Why didn't he target them?
Mm-hmm.
What was it? They were bio, right? So what was that because they were bio, or was it because I was an easier target? Probably because I was an easier target, right? Because I just was a people pleasing, so it's funny that I went through, because I was 43 when we got Serenity, and it took till then for a therapist to go, oh, we need to unpack this adoption thing. I'm like, okay, finally someone realizes that.
Yeah,
right?
we talk about that a lot, that therapists just aren't trained in that. And
no, and they would always want to talk about the deaths of my parents. And yes, again, super trauma, but it started earlier, way earlier.
Right,
and
exactly.
So I went into these big traumas with that
trauma
foundation, with trauma, right? With the foundation of trauma, right? So you just sort of like, why didn't we ever go there? But And it never occurred to me because I was so lucky. I had a good home. I had such good parents. How could I possibly say I'm not happy? How could I possibly say, my mom was a saint. She really was. And there's a park in the town that I grew up in her memory with a plaque about, that's how well known she was. There was in the small town, there was 2,000 people at her funeral, her and my dad's funerals, So how could I possibly say that I didn't have the perfect childhood? Because they raised me. She was Jean and Alan. They were Jean and Alan Dick. You know what I mean? They were a big deal in the town.
What was their last name?
Dick, D-I-C-K.
You're related to
name.
Sarah.
Yes.
Really?
Well, like I said, my birth mother was also adopted, but she was adopted by Reverend and Matilda Dick, but that was in Queens.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
My birth name was Friesen. My birth name was Friesen, my last name. And that's a super common name in Canada.
Oh, it is?
Oh, it's like Smith.
Yeah.
It's super, super common. Like I had teachers growing up named Friesen. I know a million Friesens that aren't related to me. Right?
Mine was Carico. I don't know any Caricos.
Oh, no, that'd be easier to find.
Yeah, it's pretty easy actually to find people.
Yeah, exactly. So it's when you're never allowed to speak out about the fact that you feel like you're a freak, And I remember my brother and I don't look anything alike, and we'd go out and people would go, and he'd always tell people we were adopted, and they go, "Oh yeah, I can tell." And he'd go, "Really?" They go, "Yeah, it's your eyes." And I remember saying one time, "Why? Because we both have them?" For sake, he's got brown eyes, for God's sake. I've got bluey green. Like, have you been drinking? Yeah, you've been drinking. But people need to find this connection. They need to find,
Well, you know why? I think it's I think as adoptees, we're told those connections don't matter, right? I mean, you're not told that, but it's told that through your just birth and history and going through your life. But when other people talk about their parents, I was thinking about friends of mine, you go to a dinner or something, everybody's like, "Oh, my great grandmother did this," or "my,"
right.
And you say these things so naturally, people say these things that everyone wants you to have something too. So they have to give you something. Like, let me give you this little tidbit that helps you.
I'll throw you a bone.
Yeah. Like I had so many weird things said to me growing up when I look back, and I just took them for granted. Sarah too, you just kind of go through your life like, oh, that was normal. But you look back and go, that's such a weird thing that someone said to me.
But I get it. I get it all the time. It's not getting a whole lot better, unfortunately, because I still get it for Serenity.
That's kind of what I like about this interview is that we interviewed another adoptee who adopted, and she was saying how broken the system is.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's important to focus on that it's not that.
How she talked about how broken, how the information that's out there, or the books that are written for
they're
kids
not given. And you just said the same thing. Everything you found out on your own. Nobody gave you, and in fact, they gave you bad advice.
For it.
And
I had to freaking pay for it.
Yeah.
And they gave you bad advice, the advice you were getting. So
that's right.
That's what's sad to me, because the education part should be, we all know things now. Let's just educate everybody.
Can we just educate everybody so that when we do because we have to have adoption. I know that a lot of adult adoptees bristle at that comment, but honestly, my daughter was found in a crack den, 3 weeks old, starving, poopy and full of pee, and she arrived at 2 a.m, cold. She was not capable of being raised by her mom.
I think I just want to interject for 1 second, because I don't think that people that are, anti-adoption, quote unquote, it isn't about what do you do with those kids. It's about the erasure of their identities, the changing of their name.
Yes, fair enough.
The severance of the parents ever having any hope of I think adoptees think, yes, there are children that need help. What can we do, as opposed to these new people take them on and they're never,
have no clue.
That's it. Or not just any clue, but what the need to change their names and their identity and make them mine.
Right.
And have the natural parents not have any ever hope to get them back. There should be
Right.
a door that is left open that if
Mhm.
those parents get it together one day,
Right.
they
Right.
have the option.
And
that,
so
that's what we're talking about, not just anti-adoption.
I've had some that have been very anti-adoption, and I've sort of, because they say that she should have gone to family.
I mean,
There's
an
none.
argument to be had. If there is family, that is the
but
ideal
if you
choice.
are Canadian, you know there's no family that's healthy. That's the problem. That's the problem. They don't have like any home. That's the problem. I wish that was. So for us, Serenity has got our last name, and I'll tell you why. She knows what her last name was. She knows what her name was before. She is on the post-adoptive registry. So if anybody wants to find her, they can. But the reason why, and this is purely selfish reasons, and it's not what you think it is, it's because I couldn't deal with social services anymore.
Mm.
I couldn't have them in my, like, until you illegally adopt that child, they're at your house every month telling you they make decisions on her health. They make decisions on, like, if we're in a hospital, if we have to take her to emergency, I have to phone crisis and tell them I'm taking her to
Yeah,
emergency.
I had this talk with somebody up here recently in my neighborhood who had that.
Right. And it was awful because we don't agree. I don't want to co-parent with the government. Thanks. And they made my life a living misery, and they questioned everything I did. And well, I ended up very, very ill after her adoption was finalized. I ended up with mixed connective tissue disease, and that is strictly from an ongoing stressful event. That's what the rheumatologist told me. Her adoption brought me to my knees, sobbing on many, many occasions. And I mean, chapter 9 of my book is all about social services, and because my book is not about Serenity, because it's not her story. Her story is not mine to tell. It's my story and how we came together, and how essentially she saved me, because I didn't realize how messed up I was by my adoption, because I wasn't allowed to be until I met her.
Yeah.
Not interesting. Well, what's the name of your book?
Yeah,
Sally?
I was just going to say, tell us so we can put it in our show notes and how people can find you.
It's called In Search of Serenity.
Oh, that's a beautiful cover.
We will
my son took that picture.
We'll put that in our show notes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Have a link for it.
It's on Amazon. It's number 2 on Amazon for adoption stories.
Great. This has really been an enlightening conversation, and I'm going to be doing some Google search to see if I in fact had FASD, because I have a sense FASD sense I really could have.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Probably lots of us, right? Because it's a surprise pregnancy, especially if you're very young. You know, there's a lot of things that,
and there was substance abuse already in my biological family.
Then there's a high chance that you would, right? But there's
and I have I had those symptoms until menopause, and then bye-bye.
I don't know about that.
We're going to have a little private chat, Louise.
It's going to be a bit of a fight after this.
We never have a fight. We have a good laugh over it.
Exactly, right? but it's until you can actually, for me, it was like, well, someone said, well, why do you want to know? I said, because I want to know why I am the way I am.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
And I can stop beating myself up.
And start having the information to understand and be able to heal and change.
And Sally, not just for you, but for those you love, you know?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I know that I was, you know, I mean, we bring our baggage to the table as a parent.
We do. And not just as a parent, as a wife, as a friend.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Part-time lover.
I thought we were talking later.
She forgot. She missed the later part.
We're just joking, by the way.
Just playing around. Yeah.
We like to be funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Thank you so much, Sally. This has been awesome. I'm so glad it finally worked out.
Me too. It's been great. It's been,
yes.
It's been, I will, you know, I want the conversation to always be out there. I want it to be on the table. And I want adoptees to feel like they can feel differently, or they can feel, and it's okay.
Yeah, it's a spectrum. It's
It
a
is,
spectrum
and
for sure.
and everyone's got their path and everyone's got their journey, and not everybody's in the fog. You know, some of
Right.
us just, I personally believe that I can't let that define me my whole life, because it holds me back. I'm proud of being adopted. I'm proud of being an adoptive mother, because I feel like we're going to do it differently. Not that I'm doing it perfect, because Lord knows I am not perfect.
Right. I was thinking about this. I wouldn't switch it because I wouldn't be who I am to talk,
Yes.
to be in the position I am with the friends you can't change who you are,
Yeah.
but it's a weird two
Well,
lives or two different.
somebody asked me once, like, if I was your fairy godmother and I could wave my magic wand and I could take you back to not being adopted and to not losing your parents or any of that, right? Would you change it? If I could just take my magic wand, change it. And I said, no, I wouldn't. And they said, really? And she even said, what about if I could bring back your adoptive mother and father? I said, no. I said, because it's made me who I am today. And I'm kind of proud of who I am today. Everything changes you, whether it's adoption, whether it's your parents were divorced, or whether everything changes you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's how we handle that change and how we acknowledge that change and how we, okay, this is a piece of me, but it's not all of me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I try to tell Serenity, you know?
Perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Sally.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.